The Gemara tells us in Erechin and in other places as well, when is the obligation to say Hallel? When is one obligated in the mitzvah of reciting Hallel? It's a further discussion in the Rishonim whether Hallel is a mitzvah min Torah, a mitzvah misrabanan, machokas Rishonim, and perhaps it depends on which type of Hallel we're talking about. So let's start off with what days one is required to say Hallel. So the Gemara tells us there are 18 days a year one is required to be gomer as a Hallel, to complete a Hallel. And in Chutz La'aretz, 21 days.
Does Gemara say that? Chutz La'aretz 21?
Yes, it does. 18. So 8 days Hanukkah, 8 days Sukkot, 8 days Hanukkah, 8 days Sukkot, that's 16, 1 day Pesach, and 1 day Shavuos. That's 18, plus the Shalosh Regalim, Pesach, Sukkot, and Shavuos, you add Yom Tov Sheni Shagolish, you have 21. So the Gemara goes through then why some days we say it and some days we don't. So the first question the Gemara has is why do we discriminate against Pesach? Sukkot we say Hallel Kol the whole Yom Tov, all 8 days. And yet Pesach we only say Hallel 1 day. Let me just point out, like when we say Hallel, of course I mean full Hallel, because Rosh Chodesh as well we say Hallel, but it's not going to count because it's only a half a Hallel. On Rosh Chodesh it's only a minute to say Hallel, as the Gemara tells us that one rabbi went to another town and said, what's going on here? Why are they saying Hallel? It's Rosh Chodesh. And then when he said half a Hallel, he was okay with it. It was only a minute. But either way, the Gemara wants to know what's the difference between Pesach and Sukkot. Why Sukkot warrants a full Hallel, Pesach only a partial Hallel?
Different sacrifice?
Correct. So the Gemara says Sukkot is chaluk b'karbanosov. It's each day has its own karban. Pesach also has a karban, but ka'ela. You bring the same karban every day on Pesach. So you need a new karban to be brought to require Hallel. Exactly what the connection between a new karban and Hallel is, that will be a separate shir. But the Gemara clearly assumes a new karban warrants a recitation of Hallel. And on Pesach it's the same one. So that's what the Gemara says. So the Gemara says, okay, so what about...
Sorry,
yeah.
Is there a med or something? God says to the angels they want to sing, he says, my creatures are drowning.
Very good, we'll get to that. Very good. Now we'll tie into Parshas Beshalach as well.
Oh, right, yes.
So that's the latter half, as we'll get to in a minute. Actually, it's a different Gemara. But the Gemara says, so what about Shabbos? Why don't we say Hallel every Shabbos? Shabbos is a happy day. B'charatzah Shabbos oneg. So the Gemara says...
Yeah, well, oneg is not the same as Simcha. I don't know the difference exactly, but it's a different Simcha.
Right, so why don't we say Hallel? So the Gemara says because Shabbos isn't called a Moed. Okay. Even that itself is a discussion, but among because different places it's mashma, there's different implications. Certain places it implies Shabbos is called the Moed, it's listed in the Moadim. But for our purposes here, the Gemara says it's not a Moed, so we'll take that at face value for now. So Shabbos is not a Moed, and therefore there's no Hallel. What about Rosh Chodesh? Rosh Chodesh, Ikroi Moed. Rosh Chodesh is called the Moed, and yet we don't say Hallel. So how come we don't say a Hallel on Rosh Chodesh? So the Gemara says because it's not Ikdish Basiyas Malacha. It's not a day where Malacha is prohibited. We could do prohibited activities, well it's not prohibited, but we could do activities which are normally prohibited on a Yom Tov on Rosh Chodesh, so therefore that's why it doesn't say Hallel. What about Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur? It is Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. They are called the Moed, and they are Ikdish Basiyas Malacha. So why don't we say Hallel then? The Gemara says, you're right, really we should, but it's inappropriate. It's not appropriate on a day when we're judged on people are judged, Sifrei Chaim or Sifrei Mason, the books of the living, and the books of the dead are opened up, and we're singing, we're oblivious to the nature of the day, and we're just singing Shira, and not realizing that maybe that it's a serious day and people being judged on life and death. So the Gemara says it fits the criteria, but we don't say it because it's not appropriate to be as the Rambam writes, the are in Yemei Simcha Yisera. There are days of Simcha, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, on a certain level, a very high level of Simcha, because the Rambam writes, what does sin do? Sin causes a separation between us and God, a barrier. But when you do tshuva, it takes away that barrier and you get you closer to God. And that's the ultimate Simcha L'fnei Hashem. So on a certain level, there are the ultimate days of Simcha, but for our purposes here, Hallel itself is not something that should be done on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur because it's too over, it's too in the open. So in fact, this interesting question of the Avnei Nezer. So what about when Rosh Chodesh falls out on Shabbos then? Why doesn't Rosh Chodesh require Hallel? Because it's not Iktish by Siyas Malacha. And Shabbos doesn't warrant a Hallel because it's not a Moed. But when Rosh Chodesh falls out on Shabbos, you have both. So why don't you say Hallel? The Avnei Nezer writes because you need one Machayev, you need one source that is generating from. If it's two halves, it becomes that obviously doesn't require Hallel. But either way, so the Gemara concludes that we have three requirements for Hallel. You have to be called the Moed. It has to be called the Moed. It has to be Ikdish Vasiyas Malacha. It has to be a day of which it's usher to do Malacha. And you have to have its own carbon. Yeah, Jeff, you had a kasha?
Hanukkah?
Yeah, Hanukkah. Yeah, that's very good. Hanukkah. Jeff's kasha. Baruch Shekivanti, as they say. There's nothing greater than being mechavan to the Gemara's kasha. That means you really follow so far. So that's the reason to say Hallel also. Okay, so the Gemara says, what about Hanukkah? What about Hanukkah? Does it have? Well, it clearly isn't called the Moed because it's not a biblical holiday. It couldn't. Or be the Ramban writes are allusions in the Torah in Bahaloska, perhaps the Hanukkah, but simple pshat, it's only rabbinical, and therefore it clearly can't be called the Moed. And it's not Ikdish Vasiyas Malacha. There's a minute maybe during Hadlakas Neiros not to do Malacha, but that's only a minute, and that's only during Hadlakas Neiros. So Chanukah we say a full Hallel. So how could it be that it doesn't fit the criteria? So apparently there must be another criteria. So either you need the big three, as we mentioned, Moed, Ikdish Vasiyas Malacha, or its own carbon, or as Jeff with the G points out, there must be another criteria. And the Gemara says it's Yom She'ira Bo Nes. It's a day that a miracle occurred. So if a day that a miracle happens, that by itself is a reason to obligate in Hallel, because Hanukkah doesn't have all those three factors, and yet we say Hallel, so it must be a day that a miracle happens. That itself as well is another factor in reciting Hallel. The Gemara says if that's true, so what about Purim? Purim is also post-biblical, before Hanukkah, but after the Torah. We know it made the cut in Nach. It made Megillas Esther, as opposed to Chanu Chav Hei, Hanukkah. It did not make the cut. It would have been the 25th book, but we stopped after 24. So what about Purim? Why doesn't Purim get to Hallel?
Because it's a hidden miracle.
There is truth to that, but that's not what. So this is why didn't Gemara give? That's not one of the three reasons the Gemara gives, but it is true in terms of that does play a factor. We'd have to find where it fits into those three answers. The Gemara gives three different answers, but that definitely is a factor. The Gemara says, number one is because we always say Hallel on a miracle that happened in Eretz Yisrael.
We do say Hallel.
On Purim. Yeah, that's the second answer. But we only say Hallel on a miracle that happens in Eretz Yisrael. And only that type of miracle war. What are you talking about? Last I checked, tell me if I'm wrong, Jeff, but Yitzias Mitzrayim, the exodus from Egypt, did not happen in Israel. It happened in Egypt. So we have many accounts in the room. We're all familiar with the grandfather clause. That of course, it's only once Yoshua took the Jews into Eretz Yisrael, then Eretz Yisrael became a prerequisite for saying Hallel. But clearly we had Eretz Yisrael, we had in a certain sense from Avraham Avinu. But until we actually went through the 14 years of Chiluk, the Kibush, the 7 years of conquering and sanctifying the land for Truma Maises. So until then, obviously, if we didn't have Eretz Yisrael, it wasn't a factor. And hence, therefore it's not a problem. So even though Purim, so that's why Chanukah was an Eretz Yisrael will warrant a complete Hallel. It had to do with the Beis HaMikdash, but Purim and Chutz La'aretz no Hallel. The second answer, as Jeff points out, is Kriyasa Zu Halela. That there is a Hallel, albeit it's not the classical Hallel we're used to. The Gemara tells us, I think it's Rav Nachman, Kriyasa, the Kriyas HaMegillah takes the place of Hallel. So much so, there's a famous Meiri on this second answer that says, so what happens if you live in a little town, or even a big town, but for some reason you don't have a Megillah handy, there's no Megillah Esther, and therefore you would not be reading Megillah. Parenthetically, the postum say you should just take out a Chumash and read the Megillah without a bracha, but in terms of the Megillah, let's say there's no Megillah, so the Meiri writes, then you should say Hallel, because what does the Gemara say? Megillah Esther takes the place of Hallel. But since we don't have a Megillah, so the Hadar goes back to the original obligation of Hallel. We don't pass in like this Meiri. Why not? It sounds like a very cogent argument. Why don't we say Hallel in a place where we don't have Megillah? So that gets on to a separate issue, ties into what you point before, but clearly there's a fundamental difference between the Hallel of Kriyas HaMegillah and the Hallel, what we call Hallel HaMitzri, the Hallel we say on Pesach and other days. And the fundamental difference is the Hallel we say, what do we associate Hallel with? Miracles. When a miracle, God breaks the laws of nature, does tremendous nisim, that warrants a Hallel. But the Hallel of Kriyas of Purim was, we know God's name isn't mentioned in the Megillah Esther. It's the only book that doesn't have it because that was miracles behind the scenes. So two different types of Hallel. The Hallel we say are what we call Hallel. That's only a Hallel appropriate when God breaks the laws of Teva, Kriyas Yamsuf, and the likes like that. But when God works behind the scenes, like Purim, so it's inappropriate. You can't say our classical Hallel. That was never said. That's why we don't say the Hallel. So, but nevertheless, that's the Meiri that when you and Meiri has a similar discussion, perhaps also by Hanukkah time, in terms of let's say let's say he doesn't discuss specifically this, but let's say Israeli soldiers out in Lebanon who could see the candles, but let's say in terms of making a Shechiyanu or Sha'as, and there's not just a Meiri, others as well. But either way, that's why even though we do say Hallel, but it's a fundamental difference, and that's why the famous Meshach Chachma. The Gemara tells us one who says Ashrei 3 times a day is Zochet to Olam Haba. Yet the same Gemara tells us in Shabbos, one who says Hallel every day is a Magadef and a Macharev, a blasphemer, and is nothing worse than that you're cursing out God. So last I checked, they both come from the book of Tehillim. Ashrei comes from Tehillim, Hallel comes from Tehillim. I mean, you got to get your act together. Like, which one? Am I great? Is it a good thing saying Tehillim every day, or is it a bad thing? So the Meshach Chachma answer, it depends which part of Tehillim. Because when you say Ashrei, as you'll notice in a couple of moments, or many moments, depending who's leading us, that it's in the Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Dalet. Hey, it's the everyday thing. You're thanking God. Thank God I woke up this morning. I have eyes. I could see. I could walk. The basics in life. That's what Ashrei is all about. One who says, Hallel, you're as good as your last at bat. God, when you do a miracle for me, then get back to me. Someone only sees God in miracles, you're a Magadeh, because you miss the whole essence of your everyday. The things we have in common with animals are the things you have to thank God for as well. And that's the difference between the Hallel on Purim and the Hallel all year round. That's the second answer the Gemara gives. The third answer is, Akati Avdei Achashverosh Anan. We can only say Hallel when we're in the status of Avdei Hashem, when we're avadim to God. But even though it's true we just won the war, but we're still avadim to Achashverosh, and we're in the status of Avdei Achashverosh, we don't warrant a full Hallel. So those are the 3 reasons. Chanukah, it's a miracle happened, so we should say Hallel. What about Purim? Either because Purim happened in Chutz La'aretz, either because we do say Hallel, Kriyat HaMegillah Zu Halela, or the third answer because of Akarti Avdei Achashverosh. So that's the Gemara. So the Gemara points out the reason why we don't say a full Hallel on Pesach is because It does. Sukkot has its own korban, Hallel, but on Pesach it does not. So the question is another Gemara. Is the Gemara in Sanhedrin and a famous Medrash we're all familiar with. And we'll be reading about Kriyas Yamsuf this coming week. And the Gemara gives us a totally different reason. Why don't we say Hallel on Shvi Shel Pesach? Because is it appropriate? The Egyptians are drowning in the sea. Is it appropriate you're singing Shira when my creations are being drowned in the water? So therefore that's why we don't say Hallel. So which one is it? Why do we need two reasons for Shvi Shel Pesach why we don't say Hallel? Why isn't one good enough?
I'm not sure, but this one, I'm guessing that you have that miracle of Yamsuf. That,
right.
so does that somehow connect into that?
Sure it does.
They also sang Shira at the Yom.
But it's a separate question. We did sing Shira, yeah. So that's what. So why do we need two reasons? So the Mefarshim point out along those lines because we said there are two separate reasons why you can come up why you have to say Hallel on any specific day. Either you have the big three. The number one, you need all three. It's a Moed. It's Ikdish Basiyas Malach. It's a day when you can't do work, and it has its own. That's three warrants to Hallel. And independently, it's a day where a miracle happened. So the Shvi Shel Pesach. So we need both reasons. Because first the question is, why don't we say Hallel on the whole Pesach and Shvi Shel Pesach is included? So it is a Moed Shvi Shel Pesach, and it is Ikdish Basiyas Malacha. We need the Gemara and Eric can tell me, but it doesn't have its own korban. Hence, therefore, we don't say Hallel. The Gemara over there is asking based on the big three. Comes along the Gemara in Sanhedrin and say, but there's another reason why you should have to say Hallel. Truly, it doesn't have its own korban, but it should be like Hanukkah. This like Hanukkah warrants a full Hallel because it's a Yom She'ir Boneis. So too, Kriyas Yamsuf should be a day as well. On that, the Gemara has to come on to another reason. Ma'isa Yom Tov Bayam Atam Omer Shira. But as Mike points out, but what do you mean? But the Gemara tells us in Psachim, Moshe, Bnei Oz, Yashir Moshe, they sang Shira themselves when they crossed Kiyab Sidan. So what do you mean? We shouldn't sing Shira, but they are. Well, some might say there's different between Shira and Hallel. That's a separate discussion. But let's assume it's the same thing. And Bnei Yisrael themselves sang Hallel. It says the Gemara says in Kuf Yud Zayin and Psachim that they did sing Hallel. So what's the difference? So that's what the Mefarshim point out. When do we use this? When does the klal of Ma'aseh Yom Tov Bayam play a role? Because what do you mean? Because in any type of victory, you're always going to have the enemy being killed. Usually, if you have a war, that's collateral damage. People get killed. Last I checked. As the Minchas Chinuch points out, in addition to the big three, you have to give up your life for not the big three we were talking about, but Avodah Zarah, murder, idol worship, and adultery. You have to give up your life for. But clearly, if you have to fight a war, well, you can't do I might die in war, therefore I'm not going to war. By definition, it's built into war. If you're going to fight a war, people are going to be killed, even innocent people. So when do we apply the klal Ma'aseh Yom Tov Bayam and when not? So that's what the Mefarshim point out. It all depends on Klal Yisrael. They themselves were living through the miracle. They were the ones in danger. The Egyptians were coming after them, and they were running, and they sang a Hallel. So it's clear. So when you say Hallel, because you were in danger, and now you're breaking out and thanking God. So we don't take into Ma'aseh Yom Tov. Obviously, it's clearly why you're saying Hallel. You were just saved from a tremendous situation. A tremendous miracle happened to you, and hence you're saying Hallel. But today, when we say Hallel, we're saying Hallel on an event that happened many years ago, and therefore we have no like the angels were standing around watching the event. They were bystanders. They had tickets watching the event. They had box seats. They weren't in danger at all. So with this witnessing an event or reminding of an event that happened hundreds of thousands of years ago, we weren't in danger. So we have no right to sing Hallel when other people are suffering. So that's what the Mefarshim point out. The Jews themselves, they lived through they were in danger, and when God saved them, they broke out to Oz Yashia Moshe. But the Malachim, who are they to sing Shira? They were up there in the heavens in a nice, comfortable seat, watching the Egyptians drown. So God was rebuking them.